Work it, make it, do it, makes us honor.
In searching for a topic that relates to the theme of revolution, reform, react, I discovered one of the most important and revolutionary developments of the past 30 years. The computer revolution has had tremendous impact on every aspect of our modern lives. It has transformed our society in countless ways. One of the most exciting ways is how we as students learn. In my documentary, I will be showing some of the history of this revolution in education and how it has made the modern classroom look a lot different than the classrooms of yesterday. Computers haven't always been what we see now. Back in 500 BC, the first computer was an abacus, which was pretty much a calculator. Then in 1821, the first real technical computer was invented. In 1939, the first electric computer for routine use was invented. But the biggest thing happened in 1971. The first email was sent. That was what started the connection between us on the internet. In 1973, the first computer with graphical user interface and keyboard and a mouse was made, which was pretty much connected to what we have now. In 1975, the first affordable home computer was made. And in 1983, the global internet was created. And in 1994, web surfing begins. Since the main focus of my project is how computers revolutionized education, I interviewed Mr. John Wheeler, who is the principal at Blacksburg Middle School.
1980s, in the 70s, and even before that, there were simulation programs made for different organizations, and even the internet was basically in its infancy with some of the government agencies. But in the 80s, there were some computers that came out for school use, and most of those were just for drill and practice. I mean, there wasn't a connection, there wasn't an internet in the early 80s. They just created programs that would allow you to do certain math problems or allow you to do certain science things. So they were very just black and white, very simple programs that then you had to know the programming language to create. So they started to come out in the 1980s and more with Apple, and and they steadily increased. And they've taken, what happened was, as VCRs became smaller and ways to teach with televisions became a little more adaptable and easy to get to, computers came through about the same time. So a lot of that money went towards the computers in the late 80s and instead of the television. So it evolved pretty quickly in the 80s and 90s. Used because a computer opens the world up to you now just because of what's available, because of the internet, because of the ability for video and sound to travel much faster and much easier and much less expensive. And so it's opened up a world to us that has allowed for some of the things that we used to use in the 70s and 80s, like film strips or videos, or wait for a TV show to be on where you had to record it. Now it's instantaneous and it's saved on there. And the storage is another big area that you can store a lot of things. So there's a lot of materials there. So computers have opened up a tremendous amount of interactivity and has changed how some things are being taught in a lot of different subjects. It has brought us to a point where we have the ability to not only have resources readily available. It's opened up, like I said, the whole world to us, but it's also opened up different ways that all individuals learn, and it's given us an interactive way to be able to convey information in that manner. And it's also been able to let us interact with people all over the world and get information, and not only get it and learn it, but to get it and understand what it is and make an application for it. So instead of just learning and giving the information back, Now you actually learn and you do. You can create. The computer has allowed it to be more of a creative process in learning than just a rote learning. And it's going to continue like that for a long time.
Thank you.
You're very welcome, Owen. Good job.
Mr. Wheeler got it right. Computers are used everywhere in school. This graph shows where computers are used and what percentage out of 100. English and math are used most, and even in physical education. That's pretty impressive. In order to understand what it was like when the computer revolution started, I spoke to my dad. Thanks for talking to me, Dad.
Sure thing.
When did you start school?
I started kindergarten in 1972, and I went to Dublin Primary School, which is part of the Pulaski County Public School System.
Were computers part of your early schooling?
No, when I went to school, everything was completely paper-based. It was traditional, the traditional way of going to school. We had our little pencils and our little papers, and we did everything out of books and all that.
When did you first see computers in your classroom?
When I was in elementary school, in the early 70s, I think was the first time they started giving us what we call standardized tests. They were the little tests that they had a booklet of questions, and you had to fill in the little dots with the number 2 pencil. Use only a number 2 pencil. You remember those? You've taken those too. Those first started to appear in the 1970s. Although it wasn't directly related to using computers, they were computerized tests and computerized grading for the tests. So that came along in the 1970s.
When did you actually use computers in school?
We first started seeing computers when personal computers became a common thing in the early 1980s. I think I was in high school, and I remember that the first computer was the Apple II computer, and it was kind of a new thing to us. And they didn't have hard drives; they had little floppy drives, and we were doing some really basic kind of programming stuff in high school on those. But I think that the administration started using a lot of computers to keep track of like attendance and that kind of stuff in the mid 80s, right about the time that I graduated from high school.
How did all of these things kind of change the way that you learned and act in school?
Like I said, when I was in the early part of my school, it was very traditional education atmosphere with paper and books and all that kind of stuff. But when I went to high school, the computerization of the classrooms wasn't really big yet, but like I said, we had some personal computers that we were working on. The administration started using computers, and I think everybody at the time realized, it was about that time that we started to realize that computers were really going to be the wave of the future. And not only did the teachers and the educators need to learn how to use them to educate us, they needed to educate us to use them for future college and work and that kind of thing. So that's when we first started to realize that the computers were a skill we would have to learn, and not just a cool fancy toy like a lot of people had thought they were going to be.
This chart shows how computer use has evolved throughout the years, from basic drills and practice to problem solving and computer-based instruction, thus revolutionizing the education system. And we can only imagine what computers hold for us in the future. Thank you.
Work it, make it, do it, makes us harder, better, faster, stronger.